Hello everyone and welcome to our comprehensive overview of loops in Python. Loops are the essential part of programming. In this video we will cover the basic of while loop, for loop and nested loops and some different breaks and continuous statements with loops. So let's begin our journey. These questions might seem to be difficult, but believe me guys, when you complete this video you will able to solve these questions by your own. So this is the introduction of our topic. Loops are the essential part of programming, allows us to automate and repetitive tasks. So it is all up to you if you want to print a list by printing each element in a list, or if you want you can use for loop for this purpose. For loop is used for iterating the sequence or the list string or tuples. It is also used with the range function. It takes parameters for the start and stop and step values. So this is the syntax for the for loop. For loop can also iterate over dictionaries using the items, keys and values methods. The items method allow us to access both the keys and the values of a dictionary. Now let's run our code in VS Code for better understanding. So let's make a file that known to be loop. For creating the file in VS Code, we will type the code file name .py. .py is the extension for Python. So when you run your code or you want to create a file, remember one thing, make sure to give .py at the end. So here our file has been created, so let's start writing our code for loop. Here I will write the previous example of fruits. So let's give the list of fruits: apple, bananas and orange. So after giving the list, let's make a loop for fruit in fruits. Here you can use any variable: fruit, fruits, x, y, I, anything. It will print the items in the list irrespective of the variable that we use. So let's run our code and let's see the output. Here it gives the items in the list: apple, bananas and orange. So this is pretty simple. And remember one thing, if you want your items to be printed in one row rather than the three row, you can use the AND with the print statement. If you want that you can use, but here I move towards the next problem. The second loop in Python is the while loop. While loops in Python are used to repeat a block of code as long as a specified condition is true. If you give the condition if x is less than equals to 10, then it will repeat the code 10 times, and the 11th time the condition is false and the loop breaks. Let's take an example. This is the example of the while loop. As you have seen that I assign the value 1 to the counter and give the condition the counter is less than equals to 5. This loop will run 5 times, and the 6th time the condition is false and it will break the loop. Both for and while loops have their specific use of cases. For loops are commonly used when you have a non-sequence or collection, while loops are useful when you have a condition that determines the loop's termination. The third one is the nested loops. Nested loops are loops within loop. It describes the complex iterations. Inner loops executes completely for each iteration of the outer loop. Basically, these loops are used for printing the table, some structure just like pyramid. Or there is one question here in our practice set for the nested loop. So let's move towards the VS Code for better understanding the code. Let's first understand the functionality of the while loop. Here I pass the variable counter and give it to 1. I didn't print the upper code here for the list because it prints the 2D model of the list and I described you earlier. We will understand the functionality of nested loops, but first let's focus on the while loop. Here I describe while counter is less than 0. So let's see what happens when counter is less than 0. Because I gave counter variable 1, and each time the increment happens and the value is get incremented from 1 to 2, then 3, then 4. So let's run our code here and let's see what happens. Here is a mistake, as I have told you earlier, because I gave the variable counter 1. That's the reason, and here I give the condition when less than 0. Let's change our condition from less than 0 to less than 6. So it will print 5 letters in each line, 1 2 3 4 5. Each time the value inside the counter gets incremented by 1, and it will print 6 times. It will print 5 basically, because the sixth condition is false. So let's comment it out and move towards for the nested loop. Here I write a code of nested loop that will print the table from 1 to 5. So let's see what happens. Here I will use the for loop with the range function. Basically, the range function is often used with for loops to generate a sequence of numbers. It takes parameters for the start, stop, and step values, as I told you earlier. Let's demonstrate a for loop using range function to print the table from 1 to 5. I will use another loop inside this loop, and this time this loop, the range of this loop is also exactly the same, 1 to 6. Basically, the outer loop iterates over the range of number from 1 to 5. The loop variable I represents the current number being proceed. Inside the outer loop, there is a nested loop, and that allows iterates over the range of numbers from 1 to 5. The loop variable j represents the current number being multiplied by I. So this is how our table gets printed on the console screen. Inside the inner loop, the statement print I cross j executes is responsible for the execution of the combination of I and j. It multiplies the current value of I and j and print the result followed by a space. The basically the end variable is responsible to specify that a space should be added at the end of each printed value instead of moving to the next line, because every time it gets printed the next line will get executed. Here it will not print the list of the table because I didn't give the print statement at the last. After the inner loop has completed all the iterations for a specific value of I, the print statement without any arguments is executed. This print statement is responsible for a new line character moving to a next line, and this ensures that each row of multiplication table is printed on a separate line. So that's the reason we should write a print statement at the last of the loop outside that loop. So here we will write a print statement here. So this prints a new line character moving to the next line. So let's rerun our program. This time I hope it will print the table. Or in here, as you see, the first column is for table 1, the second column is for table 2, and the third column is for table 3, and the last column is for table 5. Basically, this code generates the following output, which represents the multiplication table from 1 to 5. So as you have seen that there are 5 multiplication table from 1 to 5, 1 2 3 4 and 5. So this is the purpose of range function with the nested loop. Let's write another example of the while loop. Here I use again the value counter that is equals to 0, and I give the condition with while that the counter is less than equals to 0, less than equals to 10. So this time what I will do is I print the even and odd numbers between 1 to 10. So in the while loop, inside the while loop, I give the condition if counter modulus 2 equals to 0. Equal is the conditional if we want anything that is equals to 0. If I use a single equal sign, this is the assignment operator. It assigns the value 0 to the number. So make sure to use double equal sign while using the if condition. Inside the if condition, I use the incremented symbol counter plus equals to 1 that will increment the value inside the variable counter, and after that I use the continue statement. Break and continue statements can be used within nested loop to control the flow of the execution. They apply to the innermost loop that encloses them. The break statement terminates the loop and exits it prematurely, while the continue statement skips the rest of the loop and goes to the next iteration, just like this continue statement did. And after that, it prints the counter and increment it by 1. So here it prints the odd numbers from 1 to 10. Here 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. Basically, I give the condition for the even and it will print the odd. This is how this continue statement work. It skips the all the numbers that are even and print the all the odd numbers from 1 to 10. And if I change the condition not equals to 0, so this time this loop will print the even numbers from 1 to 10. So let's see what happened here. Let's rerun our code and see what happens. This time it will print all the even numbers, as I told you, 2, 4, 6, 8 and 10. 10 is even, that's why it prints 10, and I give the condition here counter is less than equals to 10. If I give the condition counter is less than 10, then it will print only 2, 4, 6 and 8, not 10. Let's comment it out and move towards our next example. So there are more examples in this video to better understanding of the loops, for loop and while loop. So here I write again the variable square. We can use the range function and for loop inside the list. Okay, let's see this work or not. So here I write star x star star 2 and for x in range 1 to 6 and print the square. Print the square. So let's clear it and rerun our program and let's see what happened this time. It gives an error. What's a mistake here? Squares. Oh, I give the s at the end of the print function. The variable name is square, not squares. And let's rerun again and let's see what happened. It will print the list. It will print the squares of 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. 1, 4, 9, 16 and 25. This is basically for the squares. That's why I give the variable name square and it will print 1 to 6. The 1 is the starting and x6 is the ending range. And x is the variable that is going to be printed. It will print the square of only 5 numbers. This is because the range function only prints the number 1 less than the ending range. If the ending range is 7, then it will print 6 variables. If the ending range is 6, then it will print the 5 variables. Let's solve another example. Listen one thing guys, programming is all about practice. If you don't practice, then you will forget the concept of the programming. So that's why you should always do practice of your code by your own, or you can take the questions from Google or anything. I have mentioned some of the questions at the starting of the video. So make sure to practice the questions and code by your own. So this is how you get perfection in coding. So let's make a dictionary here. Dictionary is the set of collection of object. So in Python we use dictionaries with sets and values. Here we use key value pairs. Each item in a dictionary consists of a key and its associated value. The key acts as an identifier or a label for the value. We can identify the value with the key. So here we use the key value, three key value pairs with the student names and their score. So we will print the name and score. So we use here for loop for name and grade in dict dot items. To print the items in the dictionary, we use dot items function, and inside this loop we use simple the print function with name colon and the grade. So that first it will print the name, then colon and then grade. Let's run our code and look at the names and grades, it will show an error. What I did a mistake here is I I use colon without inverted commas. So here I need to give the inverted commas because I didn't define the colon. So let's run our code, python loops.Py. As I told you that it prints the name, then colon, and then the score of each student. You can increase the values of inside the dictionaries. You can increase the key value pairs by just dot update function. Here I use three key value pairs. You can use four or five. Let's add some key value pairs to the dictionary. Here we use dot update function and pass the keys and values that we want to add in our dictionary. So here I want just one more name with its score. So let's write the name. Let's say Yasin is the name and his score is 90. And I want to add this into the dictionary. So that's we use dot update function. Let's copy the above name and score and paste it here. And let's edit it. The name is Yasin and his score is 90. And let's rerun our code and see the. I hope the Yasin is added in the list of key value pairs. So yes, the Yasin is added. So this is how we can update our dictionary. So there are more in dictionary like unordered, unique keys, mutable, immutable. We will discuss these later, but let's first focus on the loop. Here is one more thing for the loops to prevent the loops for infinite loops where the condition is continuously true. You should mention the appropriate condition or mechanism to ensure that the loop eventually ends. Otherwise, it will continue prints the value infinitely many times. So here I write the code for while true, it will true and it will print infinitely many times. So make sure to write some condition or mechanism so that your code eventually ends. It is important to avoid the infinite loop as they can consume system resources and cause program to hang or crash. In practice, you would typically include a termination condition or mechanism such as a break statement inside a loop to ensure that it eventually ends. Let's move towards our practice questions. So, as I told you at the starting of the video, now you are able to solve these questions because I told you guys the basic concepts of for and while loops. Now you can solve these questions easily. And if you find any difficulty while solving the questions, you can ask me in the comment section. So that's all for today. Thank you very much.